Welcome to the Medisynergy podcast. I'm Imogen, a 17-year-old A-level student, bringing you the most inspiring medical students, health tech founders, and young leaders to help you see if the world of health and technology is for you. I'm here today with a very special guest, my 100th episode, Dr. James Somauroo, the ultimate health tech leader, leading the way with his 2 podcasts, health tech event, and communications agency, all under the SomX umbrella. And on a more personal note, James has been a big part of helping me understand more and more about the health tech world and meeting new people within this space. So, hi, James. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to finally have you on here.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here finally. We've obviously been talking quite a while, haven't we? But and seen you in Malta, seen you in all sorts of places. But yeah, great to be on.
I'm everywhere. You can't get rid of me. And I mean, initially, how we met was when you contacted me to come to one of the SomX events, which we'll talk about later, and that was coming up to a year ago. So yeah, we've known each other almost a year now, and I thought it'd be good to have this 100th episode with someone who was the main person who got me into health tech, really. So it's really nice to be able to actually speak to you and hear more about what you get up to.
Well, I'm honoured. I'm honoured to be on for episode 100. Thank you. I just went past 300, not to brag. But, but yeah, I can tell you it sort of gets a bit easier when you get to 300. It gets less and less formal. The preparation gets less and less. But I understand that the milestones are really nice and really important to celebrate. So congratulations. And yeah, delighted to be on.
Thank you. Yeah, it is cool that we can say, right, we've done 100, done 300. I hope to get 300 at some point, maybe in 2 or 3 years' time. So we'll see what happens.
The trick is, by the way, do 2 a week. That's the trick. Do a very short episode. I did like top tips with people. So at the end of every interview, like I did like a top tips thing. So for like a year, I think almost, I had like 2 episodes a week going out, which like really bumped my like download numbers up and really bumped my like episode numbers up and stuff. But I've done less of them recently. But yeah, it's a way to actually just give value to people as well. Like people love to absorb the short form as much as the long form, and actually like quite often people would only listen to those ones, and I was like, oh, should do more of that, and then obviously didn't because life, etc. But yeah, we'll get back to it at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I do that now because of your advice. I do top tips just from the
Excellent.
end of the episode. It's a good one. It's definitely a good one. And they get listened to just as much as the main ones because
Yeah.
people have time to listen to a full thing. So it works really, really well. But going back to where you kind of started out, so you initially were in medicine, which is a lot of what we talk about on here, but some flipped, and you decided to transition into health tech, which is what you do now, which we'll look at in more detail later. But going right back to the very beginning, why did you want to do medicine?
Good question. Why did I want to do medicine? So my dad was a nurse for most of his career, and he grew up at a time where, well, he was born in Mauritius. He came over here when he was 18, saved up all his money, got a boat over here. It took him a couple of weeks to get here, and he basically just had a place at nursing school and £200 in his pocket, and that was it. And he sort of basically rose the ranks through nursing his entire career. Now, when he was doing medicine, I think that he was just doing medicine at a time where the consultant on the wards was a pillar of society. They were very well respected. They were very well paid. They were held up as like an ideal job, an ideal role, an ideal vocation. And so I think that's essentially what my dad wanted for me. He obviously had to play offense in terms of like risk coming to a new country and trying to make his way, and later on, you know, got into sort of a version of entrepreneurship, buying and selling nursing homes. And so these are all risky endeavors in order to kind of bank enough to give your family security and all that type of thing. And I think I've seen this quite a lot where, you know, second generation people that have, you know, had medicine, I guess, held up as something that they should do, are often the children of immigrant parents and things like that have had difficulty and had to play with loads of risk. And medicine has always been seen as this like safe option for people, where it is relatively well paid, it is relatively secure. It's just that word relative is important, and over time that has changed in terms of how well paid it is, how secure it is. how much of a good job, frankly, it is, no matter what your metrics. And I think that's changed massively. So my dad was a huge part of me doing medicine. And to be honest, I never really considered anything else. It was never presented to me as any other option. But simultaneously, I never pushed back against it either. It was a nice narrative for me that I was a relatively straight A student, like it was medicine or law, just generally with people like that, like even at school. And so
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just became like the default option. And actually it was a comforting and safe option because it gave me a track, it gave me safety and security in knowing what I was going to do. And so ultimately I'd have to say like that was why. It's certainly not what I said at my interview, because you turn up at interview and you're like, I like science and I like people, so let me in. And that's basically what you end up saying. um those things were true, of course, but it's not as if I loved the idea of medicine or even felt informed. If someone had sat me down and just said, like, do you realize what your life will actually be like? Do you realize what it will actually entail? Does that fit with your interests? Does that fit with the way that you want to live your life in your 20s and 30s and 40s? And obviously you can't know what you're going to want later down the line. Another problem with getting on, a conveyor belt early, you don't know what changes in your life are going to happen and how you're going to feel, and how your job might fit in. And I think that's the thing, medicine, it was very, very inflexible, that what you're presented with early on is basically what you do for 40 years. And I think other careers allow for flexibility, that you can move, you can make sideways moves, you can make moves up and down, you can do all these things. And essentially the sort of medical track just ended up getting the better of me. But I guess we can talk about that.
I think you've brought up a lot of good things that I could pick up there, especially, if you're good, if you're very clever, very academic, you get all these A's, A stars, law or medicine, that's definitely still a thing, because I have considered both. 100%, that's definitely still a thing. And the conveyor belt, I think, as you say, you weren't presented with that information, and a lot of people don't go out and try and find that information, and even if they do, it's not there. And what I found is that going to open days and asking people, okay, so you want to do medicine, like what med school, obviously you're here at this open day, but what other universities are you interested in? They go, oh, I don't know, this one was just on a weekend, I was free, I'm not really sure. Like, they don't do the research. Like us as teenagers, we're not that bothered, we're just like, yeah, I'll just do something. But it's, as you say, it's like 40 30 40 50 years of your life. You need to do the research, you need to kind of figure out what you're getting yourself into, and it's an ever-changing system and process, and we're ever-changing people. Like, it's quite hard to say, yep, that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. It's a big decision, so people need to be able to do that research. And you've mentioned there how in other careers, especially health tech, which we'll come on to later, you can move around, you can go sideways, you can go up and down. Whereas medicine, there's a very set path, and other things, there's not so much of a set path. So yeah, it's very interesting that you've brought that up.
Definitely, definitely. I think it must also be recognized and said out loud that, look, at the end of the day, if you go into medicine with your eyes wide open, you can do interesting things. You can put a portfolio career together. You can aim to go into a certain specialty because of its characteristics and how they suit you. And those do differ wildly. The same two students that go to medical school, one can become a public health consultant somewhere in Liverpool, the other can be an ICU consultant in London. Those are two very different careers, and what makes up your day and lifestyle and all that sort of stuff. And I think, yeah, you're right. It is about doing the research. It's funny because I can remember doing work experience. And it's funny, I've not actually thought about this in years, but I did the work experience twofold. I did A&E for a bit, and I did ward work for a week. I was fortunate and privileged because my dad obviously still had connections from when he was a nurse and chief nursing officer and all these different things. So I was able to get this work experience. And so it wasn't sort of the traditional work experience. It was literally just like someone having a word and like sticking me on someone. And the interesting thing was, like, it's so funny. I haven't thought about this in so long. When I was on the ward work with just someone in general medicine, really, just, acute med, whatever, like, they said to me, I said, like, have you got any advice? And they said, don't do it. And I was like, oh, that's weird. That's quite jarring. And I was like, that's the first time that like the opposite narrative has actually been said to me, because of course, like, when my dad was introducing me to this person that he knows, and I was in A&E with the person that he knew, and like everything's wonderful, and you're seeing all these procedures and you're seeing all this fun stuff, and I was like, wow, this is like really cool. Like, I like this is very sort of dexterous and using your hands, and you're not sat at a computer answering emails, like you're actually doing stuff and you're working with people. This is amazing. As soon as I got onto the ward though, like this sort of SHO, like random SHO that was just or sort of core trainee, I guess it'd be now, but like, yeah, it was the first time that someone said that to me. And it's funny because I've almost blocked that out until it's just come up in my mind now, that like it was a counter narrative that I didn't really explore, other than just to think like, oh, he was probably just having a bad day, which we all have, of course. And so I didn't really put too much weight on it. And you're right, like it was up to me then to sort of interrogate that, which I didn't do. But again, like, this isn't me saying like doing medicine or not is good or bad. The whole point of this is it has to be right for you. And that's the journey of exploration that you have to do if you're considering it, is like truly understand what you're going into and have your eyes wide open. And if you love that stuff, brilliant, you'll be a great doctor. Or great whatever. If you know that, hey, I'm going to go into med school and do this thing, and then I'm going to go and work for a tech company, and like that is my path, or I'm going to do it and then I'm going to go to consultancy, because hey, I might as well get a medical degree if I can do it. It's a great degree. I can do loads more. It gives me increased options if I think of it like that, rather than thinking of it as it's a degree that 100% makes me a doctor. It's like, no, it's just a degree. You can apply for anything you want afterwards. Of course you can. You have exactly the same options as everyone else. It's just that you also have this very clear option of being a doctor that then isn't available to everyone else. So you can go into it considering that too. But yeah, I think there are more and more people now that are going into medicine with those things available to them, and they genuinely consider different things, and they have a path plotted of like, hey, I'm going to do F1, and then I'm going to do F2 in Australia, or I'm going to do F3 in Australia, or I'm going to locum in A&E for a couple of years, and I'm going to try and like build a little startup on the side, or I'm going to do GP because actually like the idea of doing nights into my 30s, like just I don't like that, so I'm going to do GP, or even I just really enjoy family medicine and the community in that unit. I want to do that. So people, it's just about knowing and learning as much as you can about all these different things, and just trying to put together the things that interest you, I guess. And you can actually do that within medicine now. It's becoming more common, and I guess people don't realize it.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Just going in with your eyes wide open. Thing is, I say this a lot. I don't understand why you wouldn't look into it more. But again, if you've got that maybe immigrant parent background and that's what you're potentially expected to do, you just think, well, why would I look at anything else? This is a good path. It's pretty straight, well, relatively straightforward. I'll just follow this. It's fine. And I had the exact same work experience. I've been to quite a few work experiences now, and it was GP, surprisingly, because even speaking to now, they seem to have it a bit more balanced than other doctors. I'm not even joking, every single one of them said to me, don't do it. They said,
Wow.
tell all my children, don't do it. And when I went to the hospital in Exeter, I was not with doctors, I was with midwives, but they all said, yeah, my kids do science, I'm not letting them go into medicine. And it was very, very interesting. And that's probably also what helped me go, right, okay, why don't they want to do it? Let's explore this a little bit. Let's start a podcast, see what people actually have to say. Because it's all good hearing it from someone else, but hearing from someone who's actually in medicine, okay, how are you finding it? How's that going for you?
It is jarring. The other side of it, though, is to go, well, if it's like this now, it's sort of a breaking point. The workforce issues are huge right now. There is a really interesting convergence going on, though, of like all the stuff going on in health tech versus what life is like on the clinical ground floor. And actually, I saw Umang the other day from Microsoft, and he whipped out his phone and just showed me their latest Copilot, which they've got, which is the phone that sits in the background, or the computer system that sits in the background, hears everything. It's a large language model. It then turns it into the exact history of everything going on. So presenting complaint history, presenting complaint, drug history, social history, like it's all there. It's all there, perfectly laid out, so that you then don't have to go to the notes. Tortus, TORTUS, Don Pimentel's the founder. They're doing a similar thing with co-pilots for primary care. Like, these things are coming in to relieve admin burdens. And there's other things that are coming. Like, there's a lot going on that will make clinicians' lives easier. That it's just a very challenging environment, particularly right now with how people are stretched. And no matter how much technology comes in, you have got to ask yourself the question, like, yeah, okay, this technology can save people time, but are they just going to get more squeezed now? Are they just going to be expected to, if it halves their time, are they just going to be asked to do twice as much? And actually, where does the system still break? All these questions are still to be answered, but as I say, you can't get away from the fact there are people for whom medicine is still a very good career and like exactly what they should be doing. And so the goal of the system, really, especially that kind of 17, 18-year-old A-level system, has to be the great filter to put the best people on the job. Because the problem is where you put people like me on it for whom it is not right. And actually, you could argue it's the goal of the medical schools and their entrance systems to actually make sure they filter it for the people that are going to stick it out. Because the more people that leave, the more difficult it becomes for the workforce. And so you're just more and more constrained with time because there's less people to do the work. And so it is not good the way it's currently set out, but there are many hopeful things on the horizon to make life easier for clinicians. It's just a case of the whole health tech community, the whole clinical community, the whole biotech community, the whole lot of it just actually coming together to get this stuff done, which, of course, is what I'm part of now.
It's really interesting that you said that, because I was just about to ask you, do you think it was the right decision? And you just changed your mind, but you kind of answered it there. No, it wasn't right for you. And it's interesting now, having lots of friends who are still doing medicine or kind of same stage as me, is it the right thing for me? They're seeing everyone leave. They're seeing how unhappy people are, having these people say, don't do it. That's not great, because then less people will apply, and that has a knock-on effect in years to come as well, which is not great. You were in medicine and then you went, right, this actually isn't the right thing for me. So was it a pull away from medicine, or was it a pull into health tech, or was it a bit of both? How did that work? Why did you leave?
It was a bit of both. So what I learned when I very first started, it's quite interesting actually. So when I first started medicine, when I became an F1, started as a doctor rather than started medicine. When I started as an F1, when I got on the wards, it was actually super enjoyable because it became about not listing out the causes of pancreatitis in order of incidence and in order of stuff. Like, it wasn't getting grilled at the bedside by like a consultant, like asking you to list the blah 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 reasons for that. Like, it was none of that. You didn't have to do any molecular biology. You didn't have to list out any pharmacological processes. You didn't have to do any of that stuff, which is what I realized. Like, I hated doing that stuff. Actually, just getting stuff done on a ward by like building relationships with certain nursing staff and physios and OTs, and making sure that your radiology scans are done first by like making sure that you swing it with the radiologist and you get them on side. And if they're going for drinks after work, you nip along and you have a chat to them and you connect with them because they support the same football team as you. And like, that means that you can get your scans done ahead of like all of that sort of stuff I was good at. And I really enjoyed that stuff because actually I realized I finally gained the sense of like self-worth. I was middling at med school, right? Like I was just there or thereabouts. Like, I got through it. But once I was there doing that stuff, I was like, I'm not going to sit here and say like I was excelling at loads of different things, but the point is like I was getting things done. And actually, you're part of teams and like I wasn't drowning. And some people would be really good at medical school, like really good, and they can list off the 10 causes of pancreatitis in order of incidence and blah, 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 but then they get on the wards and actually that environment, they start struggling and it's not as right for them doing the job as it was at medical school. And that again is like a really interesting sort of paradox as well of like, there's a great reshuffling that goes on once everyone qualifies in terms of like who again is right for the job versus not. So actually that sort of stuff was great. Like, I absolutely loved it. The challenge for me, though, was that I preferred fixing the system than fixing patients, because I would see things like the first thing that I saw was that there was only one printer that worked on the whole floor. And that meant that every F1 had to queue out the door first thing in the morning, 10 to 9, waiting for like their lists to be printed so they could take them on the ward rounds. And it was like, this is ludicrous. There's like 8 printers on this floor. Like there's only one that works, and it didn't print double-sided. It was like, this is ludicrous. Like for so many different reasons, this is outrageous. So I literally just rang a few, I rang for, I don't know, facilities or where the heck that I rang, but like got it sorted so that there was a couple of printers that now worked. All of a sudden, like everyone can like print their list on time. People don't have to get into the hospital as early. Like everyone's stress level first thing in the morning just comes down, and it's like quite palpable. Like, fixing this really small thing like caused this effect. And it was like, this is a little bit addictive, this stuff. Like I could fix other things. And it was like, oh, discharge summaries take ages to write. The computers are really slow. So put a few people together and was like, how do we make this easier? Like, let's just change this from this weird computer system to like a white box answer that you just type free text. And that just makes the computers run quicker. It's easier. The GPs in the community said it was a better idea. So it was like, right, fine, that's now fixed. Discharge summaries are easier to do. So I just went around like fixing some of this type of stuff. And so that, I would say, in answer to your question, was the pull into health tech, because I started seeing and realizing that, hey, if I work twice as long, twice as many hours as a doctor, it's not going to have as good as an effect as if I just fix 3 or 4 things that are going wrong for people, because then many people can work 25% better, which far exceeds, even me just staying in for twice as long. So the gains were far more the more I was fixing things with tech. And so that, called quality improvement projects when you do them as a doctor, is what I got good at. But I would also then, my interest in, I guess my natural kind of entrepreneurship nature then kicked in, of like, it's not enough for me to just tell people what the problem is. I need to actually fix it. And so money always came up as a problem. So I then started shadowing people in finance and got onto this thing like the KSS School of Clinical Leadership, which was like a thing that you could go on and they help you speak to finance people, and they teach you about finance and how health economics works and all this sort of stuff. And that was great. I don't think it exists anymore, but that was great, because then I learned how to write a business case. And then as soon as you can write a business case, serious people in the hospital start listening to you. And then when you get around that table, you can start to make serious change, because you can go like, and you're credible to like the hospital CEO or clinical directors, and you're credible to all your team. So you can actually start to get things done, which is super interesting. So I built up this network of tech companies that I was basically just speaking to and saying, hey, you can be the solution here if you want to come in. And so I'd speak to the tech companies. So that's what dragged me into the tech world. My push factors out were, I was a worrier, and I was the person who would wake up in the middle of the night and ring the on-call F1 and be like, dude, I think I forgot to do this, and this. Can you check it for me? And he'd be like, relax, just go to sleep. And she'd be like, yeah, don't worry about it. Like I was so, and that started to get to me. And as I got later in my career, that got better. But it always weighed on me that I had this sort of like low grade anxiety almost at all times. And I think that might have been connected to like just generally the fact that I wasn't as academically diligent as other people were going through their specialty. The anaesthetists loved anesthetics. They love to talk about the physiology and the pharmacology, and they'd enjoy revising for the exams at least somewhat. I'm not going to say like all of it, of course. No one does, because those exams are brutal. But at least somewhat they would find that enjoyable, and I never did. And so I think I was always held back by that, and it gave me that extra level of worry, because I was always like on the back foot when it came to like my academic knowledge. I was always good with the patients, and I loved that side of things, but yeah, I was always held back from that perspective. But yeah, my push factors out, I didn't love it, is the main one. And because I didn't love it, it just started to grate on me. And there were certain things that happened in the hospital, especially in intensive care, where like I just didn't agree morally with what was going on. And my framework for ethics and morality just differed from that of everyone else in my environment. And so that's not, by the way, me saying high and mighty that I'm right, they're wrong, and I hold myself to a higher ethical code. That's not true. It's just that it meant that my day-to-day of what was considered normal practice was incredibly painful for me, and a lot of additional cognitive load. that we were doing things to people I didn't think we should have been doing, and like we were holding people in states that I didn't think we should be holding them in, and like all those things. But that wasn't the state of my environment, and so it became an incredibly painful place for me to be. And unfortunately, I didn't have the facilities to explain that in such an eloquent way at the time. It just made me just a very angry person, and just I started acting out, and I started like just making decisions that were like just I shouldn't have been making at my level, and just putting myself in situations that I shouldn't have been really in. And like obviously I did nothing that crossed any lines, but like it just wasn't comfortable to be me in that scenario. And so yes, that, and I took the anesthetic exams, passed the MCQs, failed the OSCE Viva. That's not too unusual. But then when I looked at revising for the exams, by the way, those exams, everyone moans about them, but a great gateway to kick people out like me who shouldn't be there. Because I think if it wasn't for failing those exams and having to revise for them, I might still be in medicine. But the thought of revising for those exams again just made me think, you know what? I don't want the prize that passing these gives me. And that became very clear to me, that actually by studying and passing these exams, I actually build a prison for myself in somewhere that I don't want to be. So I got out at that point, and it was like, okay, now I'm going to focus my energy somewhere else. So that's what became important.
That's really, really interesting. I think to round off what you've basically said there a lot is that you were not so well, you were good at med school, obviously you got through it, but you much more enjoyed the practical side of it once you're actually in F1. And some people would
Correct.
get the academic exam, getting the answers right kind of side of it. And then once they got into that F1 practical side, not so good. And you know, you enjoyed what you did, but when you're more, so let's say social and academic, when you're more social, you're going to enjoy the job, you know, talking to patients, doing that side of things. And when you get to exams, you're not going to enjoy it. But with that social side, that could potentially make you a better doctor, enjoy your job more. But then, as you say, you have that anxiety because it's more personal. It's less kind of just patients and numbers, academics, right? Yeah, they've got this, I can list that off. That's why it weighs on you more. And then you have these people who are more academic, more sciencey, less social, and it doesn't weigh on them as much. And so you have this really weird balance. What is better? Which one do you want more of? Because you don't want your doctors being anxious about it. Like that doesn't help either, but you don't want them to be completely desensitized to what's going on. So I think that's really interesting that you touched on that.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. And I think that's part of it. You know, intensive care was full of people that really cared about the minutiae and the detail and the numbers and the actual diagnosis and, you know, the investigations and, you know, splitting hairs of this versus this and that versus that. And I was much more big picture. And I think that's the thing. That's what kind of got me in the end when it comes to, you know, I rubbed up against my environment too much. And I think actually though that's where medicine is actually quite good, in that if that sort of stuff is played out early, perhaps I would have been better somewhere like psychiatry. Perhaps I might have been better somewhere GP. And that increasingly I thought that. I actually reapplied for public health as one of my options when I was looking at leaving and going into health tech. So I sat the entrance exam for public health and thought that that might be a really good answer actually. And the more that I now interface with like influencers and medical content creators and all that sort of stuff, I actually spoke to Dr. Karan Rajan, the guy who's got like 8 million followers across platforms. I interviewed him on my podcast last week. And like the more I speak to people like him, I kind of think we're all roads leading to public health for me, because what he does in creating so much content for the public is basically modern public health. And the more I'm now in that content world, it sort of satisfies my desire for like educating the public. And, you know, his mission is tackling misinformation and things like that, which, you know, I totally get on board with, because it's all about, you know, how can you as an individual as a creator anyway, how can you as an individual with your singular effort educate and inspire many people to take a behavior change when it comes to their health. And ultimately, that's what public health tries to do, right? It's what Public Health England tries to do, is, you know, educate the public and you know, make them enact healthier behaviors. And that's what medical content creators and influencers do now. So it's super, super interesting.
Yeah, he's really good. I love his videos. And I remember actually at a SomX Health Tech talk, Grace Jimpson was talking.
Mm.
Obviously, she doesn't have a medical doctor background, and she was saying how she wanted to make an impact on a population scale rather than just limited to the clinic that you see every day, which is still good. There's a place for that, but she wanted to have a much big picture, like you said, impact. And I think that's really, really cool. And so on to the next question, kind of linking to this, you've mentioned a few people there, including yourself. Why is it important for doctors to get involved in health tech, whether instead of clinical practice or alongside it?
Good question. Firstly, it's not important. It's not important for everyone to do it. It's not important for anyone to do it. You should only do it if it interests you. And I think that's one of the things that I really, really, really want to make absolutely clear for people, which is that health tech's not a world that you need to be in for any kind of CV bashing or like, just getting points for applications or whatever it is. It's a messy sort of Wild West world that doesn't have the nice, lovely conveyor belt structure that medicine has. It's so completely different. So my answer, I guess, is that it's not important. And really, it should be reserved for the people that are genuinely interested in it. And actually, for that reason, anyone, any clinician, and don't restrict this to doctors, by the way, any clinician, anyone that works in the hospital, even if you're on the managerial side, can get involved in health tech in a variety of ways because it's less Wild Westy than it was in the sense that there is structure. There's small companies, there's big companies, there's lots of people doing lots of different things. And so you can, whatever your skill set, add value to a health tech company that's doing a health tech job somewhere, doing something. Because health tech can often be conflated with having your own startup and starting a tech company and building some software or building a medical device. And that's not what everyone in health tech does. So no matter what your skill set, no matter what you're interested in, it's the case of like, are you interested in it anyway? Are you being drawn into health tech? Once you are, and there's loads you can do, whether it's software development and building software and helping people do that, whether it's sales that you're good at and you just want to help someone sell something, whether it's like we said, like clinical or public health or all those different skill sets, or even if it's just business, if you've done an MBA, or if whatever your skill set is, health tech now is like a whole industry. And so you can fit into it as long as you care about the mission and all that sort of stuff. And my advice with finding a way in, which is often always the question that comes afterwards, is like, find what you're genuinely interested in. Find a real clinical area that you're interested in, whether that's women's health, whether that's cardiology, whether that's dermatology, whatever it is. Find a clinical area that you're interested in. Find a technology that you're interested in. Is it VR? Is it AI and large language models? Is it devices and hardware and engineering? Is it that? And put those two things together. And so if you're women's health and epigenetics, then hey, there's a load of companies there for you, like Dharma Health, and read about them, learn about them, DM the people on LinkedIn, because by the way, there's no nice application system nationally to get involved in health tech. You got to do some messy stuff. So you got to message them on LinkedIn and expect no reply and play the numbers game, message them loads, message loads of them. But if you've done the reading about them and their space and you message them with a really nice offer of your time, or you give them something to read because you think it'd be interesting to them based on something else they've done, like something that's truly personalized that you think they would like, then hey, you're quite likely to get a response. And you can leverage that into a little side gig or writing some content for them or doing some admin for them, managing their diaries. Like that's your way in. And then once you're in, you learn and you keep adding value to people and you keep going up the ladder.
I think I really like that you said it's not important and you actually like gave a proper answer rather than going with where the question was leading. I really like that you said that. And I think that's very interesting. Not everyone can get involved in it. And if it doesn't interest you, it doesn't interest you. And when I decided I wasn't doing medicine, I messaged Dr. Ams and Dr. Abdul from Peer and said, right, digital health guys, what should I do instead? With medicine, if you want to be a doctor, you study medicine. That's pretty much it. It's pretty obvious what you need to do. And I've spoken to like Dr. Keith Grimes about this as well. There's a set route into health tech, and it's almost so open that it's kind of closed, and you've just got to kind of find a way. You've got to find a way, and I think it's nice. I think it's nice. It's open, and there's not one set way, but obviously that is slightly tricky, especially if you have a doctor background where you're so used to following a set path. You've got to go, right, okay, let's see what happens. And they said to me, you know what, just do anything sciencey, anything, or yeah, as you say, sales, business, anything, because it's a lot of companies. So whatever can get you into a company to do with, obviously it's health, so it is science related. Just do that, and if you enjoy it, something will come out of it. So I think you've touched on a very important point there.
Yeah, following your interest is so important. I think as medics, we're taught to chase clout quite a lot. We're taught to chase points on applications and like, does this count? And is this on the assessment? Is that, you know, we're taught that a lot, and we sort of forget that we're people and we have interests and we have desires for our life, and we we transcend our own happiness and tiredness and hunger and thirst for others all the time. And actually, sometimes it's about what are my interests and what do I want to do, you know?
So now you have co-founded SomX. So what is that? What was your aim around that? And what have you got up to so far?
So before, when I mentioned that I was helping tech companies get into hospitals, right? So what happened was I was basically finding these problems in healthcare, going out to find what the solution might be, only to make my own life easier. But I'd end up saying to these companies things like, oh, you could solve this problem in a hospital, but before you go, you're going to meet these three people. What you want to say is you want to say this to the finance director, and actually you want to say this to the CEO, because I know them and like this is what they're going to want to hear. You're going to need to say this to them and that to them. And then I'd say, like, let me just see are you presenting anything? Let me see your slides. Like, you want to use this word rather than this word, or that word rather than that word. And maybe we should talk about bed days rather than money saved, and like, because they'll get it. And blah, blah. So these little things. So I was basically becoming like a communications consultant or sales consultant, or whatever, however you want to describe it. But I was basically helping them by doing that stuff. Now, fast forward a bit of policy time, and I spent time doing various bits and bobs. But I joined a health tech accelerator, which is a program that supports supports tech companies selling into healthcare, basically, and helps them with loads of different stuff. So I joined that, and I was helping startups with this type of thing because I'd already been doing it. And the accelerator helps them with lots of different things. It helps them with introductions, it helps them with mentorship, it helps them with support. And I started running that entire program with someone called Hannah. And the two of us basically ran this program for a year and we helped like 30 and then 60 startups, right, doing all these different things. And so that skill of being able to tell them what to do and then give them an introduction to someone that they might be able to sell to just got stronger and stronger and stronger. And we, Hannah and I became better at it. I then realized that, hey, I could just help them with this, and that could be sold as a service. And basically, not being from any of these worlds, my fiance now, but my partner at the time in love and life and crime and business, is Jessica, and she was a director of Fleischmann Hillard, so a big global PR agency. Now, PR means something very different in medicine than it does in the real world. And PR in the real world means public relations, which basically means press and getting people, getting people press and attention from others, and getting them spots in publications and all that sort of stuff. And concurrently, I was getting very good at content, and so I'd started on writing on LinkedIn and a podcast and health newslettery type stuff. And so I was getting good at content, and it just became very apparent that we could help health tech companies with content and PR. We could be a very modern communications agency that basically solved marketing for healthcare companies and health tech companies specifically at the time. And because I had this big network, and because I'd assimilated all this goodwill in the system, by my style of networking is basically just do someone a favor, don't ask for anything in return, and that's probably the best, appeases my social anxiety enough to basically just talk to them for a bit if I just offer to help them. So like I had all this goodwill based, just knocking about in the system. And as soon as I launched this idea, like a few people got in touch and said like, hey, we'll be early clients. And that gave us some early revenue. and Jess and I perfected the products. And I say perfected, you never perfect anything in this world. You just hope to get a little bit better every day, which is what we did, and we still do every day. But yeah, we had some early revenue, and we were fortunate in that sense. And yeah, we kicked on from there. And so basically what SomX is now is a communications and a creative agency for healthcare companies. And we serve health tech, biotech, pharma, and public sector organizations with communications strategy, multimedia content, press and PR, and design and branding as well. And increasingly, we're doing events and media production too. So what started as I'll write your LinkedIn stuff and Jess will write your press releases has now turned into a fully formed company with, 15, 20 clients and, 10, 15 humans in it and stuff. And it's been a heck of a journey. But yeah, what we're broadly doing is sitting in the health tech, biotech, pharma, life sciences spheres, and we're serving those clients. And to be honest, we're trying to basically be a good member of those communities. And what that means is we put on events, we create a lot of content ourselves, we do lots of things that of course help with our brand and put us front of mind for others, but there's lots of different ways to do that. Jess and I just focus on community because it's what we want to see more of in the world, I guess. And so it's more natural for us to put events together than it is to do other forms of, I guess, brand and that kind of thing. But yeah, that's what we do. That's who we are. And yeah, it's been a heck of a ride.
It sounds absolutely insane what you guys have been up to. And going to branding, I think branding is so important, because what Dad and I found at MedTech World Malta is we'd ask someone, okay, so what's your medical device or what's your service? And they might have the best service in the world or the best device in the world, but if they can't explain what it is to people, it's not going anywhere. Nothing's going to happen. And we're speaking to this person for 5 minutes and they couldn't explain to us what it was they were trying to sell. And we were sat there, okay, sure, we're not medical. Maybe it's because we weren't in the space enough. However, you do need to sell it to people who they're not going to know everything. And so if you can't do that, that's not great. And that's why branding is so important. And going to the event side of what you do at SomX, and you said that's more of what you like to do now that you can delegate other things to other people in the company. That's how we met, you and I, me and Jess. And you said about, doing favors for people out of goodwill. I remember when we spoke to you, I was in the car with Dad in a car park, and we were just about to go to my first ever networking event with Exeter Uni or Exeter Business something. And you were speaking to us and you're like, yeah, so I've got this event, and I hadn't heard of it. So I didn't know how much of a big deal it was at the time. Like, obviously I knew it was a big deal, but I hadn't been to it yet. So I didn't know what it was like. He said, yeah, so on Tuesday, we've got this event in London. We do a few events every year. And Dad goes, oh, okay, so could we come to that one? You're like, yeah, sure. I mean, I make the tickets, sure, I can give you guys two. And we were just sat there like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And giving people opportunities. And like, you didn't have to do that, you didn't even have to get on a call with us, but it's definitely good to build this community and bring other people into it. So yeah, I mean, I'm really thankful for that. And I think it's definitely good that you can build communities and bring people together and just do favors for people, and they'll appreciate that more than other services you're doing potentially.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something in that. I think what I've learned about having your own company, Jess and I are fortunate because our business model, we could have been freelancers, right? We could have just freelanced for companies, which basically is what it was at the start. We just felt that 2 companies is safer than 1 when you're freelancing, and then 4 companies is safer than 2 when you're freelancing, but then you can't do all the work, so you need someone to come in and help. So you need to hire a freelancer as freelancers, and then all of a sudden you blink and you've grown so much that actually you can now call this a business, and actually I need to work on the business, not in it, because there's actually functions that need to run that need my time that aren't just serving clients. And then all of a sudden you've got a business. But we're fortunate in that we never had to take investment. And so we own all of our company. So actually all the decisions that we make with how we spend our time, with how we spend the profit or lack thereof, or like all that sort of stuff, we're completely in control of our own destiny there. Like, everything is a choice. Now, of course, we have duty to our clients. And of course, we have duty to ourselves and each other with paying the mortgage and paying the bills and all that kind of thing. But raising money is very glamorized, particularly in our space. But calling a spade, you are giving away part of your company, part of your autonomy and decision making, because board votes go with that money often, most of the time. So you're sacrificing some of your freedom for the cash. Now, what you're doing in that deal when you're raising money is you're saying, well, I am willing to sacrifice that freedom because the person I'm bringing on is aligned in what I want to. And we're going to do that together with their capital. And actually, we're going to pay them back, and more so later down the line. And that's what you're saying. I just have a pathological desire for freedom that I would really struggle with anyone telling me what to do. It's actually what held me back quite a lot in medicine, actually. I say that slightly tongue in cheek, but I could take direction better. I do struggle with it. And running a company somewhat is a democracy, which I have to count to 10 quite often before I give my side of things. But yes, where I'm going with this is that you are afforded an element of lifestyle architecture when you own your own company. And for all the negative things that come along with owning your own business and the challenges, etc., there are many positives. And one of them is the ability to architect your life and spend that resource to create the world that you wish existed for you. And that's where I think it comes from, is that I wish I had a community that I could have been part of. I wish I had these events that weren't boring, that I could go to. I wish I had these things. And so that's what I guess we've tried to create in those things. And when it comes to giving our time to kind of, give opportunities to people and network with people like yourself, again, that is the beauty of it. There's no one telling me that I can or can't do anything. And so actually where the line blurs between, is this a business activity or is this me just doing someone a favor because it feels good? I don't actually have to interrogate that much. I just have to go, well, that felt good for some reason. Maybe it will be business ROI positive. Hey, I'm on this podcast, later down the line and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure with what you're going to do in your life and your career, that might come back to pay me in some way. But if it doesn't, who cares? Because actually it felt good in the moment. And I don't need to write it off against that. I don't have someone above me, giving me a point system for that sort of stuff. So yeah, fortunate in that regard. And so, yeah, when it comes to networking and stuff, like I've said to you before, I'm probably said to you before, my approach to networking is just, can I go into this event, do two people a favor and then leave? And I'm like, okay, then I've done my bit. And I can go back to my dog.
Yeah, no, we've spoken about this before, actually, how you and Jess are more naturally introverted, I think you've said. And I remember that time I met you, we were one of the last people to leave the SomX event, and I was getting and I was having an introverted moment because I am more introverted than the rest of my family. So I'm like, okay, I want to go back home. Yeah, to my dog. I've had enough of the socializing now. But why do you think it's important for like-minded people to come together and collaborate at events like this and, network, find people to, not even business ideas, as we've said, just to meet like-minded people? Why is it so important?
Because that's where the answers to everyone's questions live. That's where the new ideas live. And because if you sit in isolation with no extra information, you can't solve a new problem. Imagine trying to sit and solve a problem without the ability to go on the internet. That's basically what you're doing. If you're siloed in a group, if you're a group of clinicians, if you're doctors in the doctor's mess, right, talking about a problem in the hospital, you'll just talk about the problem. You might try and think of some solutions and all that sort of stuff. You'll pull on information that you have. But now imagine if you're a group of doctors in the doctor's mess talking about a problem with 4 computer scientists, 2 engineers, an artist, a product designer, and imagine all of you now trying to solve a problem together. The ideas that will come out of that and the different methods of thinking, of even approaching the idea. Someone that approaches an idea with a design thinking mindset versus someone that is just point and shoot, it's worlds apart. Like a mathematician versus a design thinker versus a clinician versus an artist versus it's honestly, it's the reason, quite frankly, is because that's where the answers live. And the thing when we put events together is no one wants to listen to panels of like the same people saying the same things over and over again. And so the whole idea about making a panel is so that you get new insights when you put people together that might not have and probably haven't spoken to each other before, and you get them to have a conversation about something that they might disagree on and come up with different opinions. And then truth can be found somewhere in the middle or discovered somewhere. Or, as I say, completely new ideas and directions and insights. And so that's the challenge. And that's the interesting thing about what we do and putting content and events and stuff together, which is like, the reason that you bring those disparate groups together is because those disparate groups are stakeholders in the same problem. And the word stakeholders is jargon, but they all have a stake in the answer and finding the answer. They all stand to benefit from getting the answer to the problem, but they need each other to either enact the solution or come up with the solution. And only by bringing those groups together and putting them in the same room are you going to get to that answer. And you're certainly going to get there way quicker at the very least. So that's the beauty of it. There's also joy in that as well. Like, as someone that then puts on those events and you see those things happening, that brings a huge amount of satisfaction personally to Jess and I. And, you know, hearing the startups that have been created out of our events, or the people that have found jobs and employment, you know, we see ourselves as like, by putting these things on and just smashing these groups of people together, like, we're just helping equalize the world. People find a better job for them, and that company finds a better employee for them, and that company then goes on to do something better. And we're just helping progress the world forwards, I guess. And I think even if we were to sell SomX one day, I think we'd always have to do something along those lines, just for the personal satisfaction and the feeling of like forward momentum and stuff. Like, I think that's the sort of thing that I think we're good at, and what makes the world a better place, and that kind of ikigai concept of bringing those things together.
And I mean, even on a really simple level, you might have all of the doctors with a big problem. They're like, right, this is a problem in our healthcare system, but they have no idea how to come up with a solution. Then you get, as you say, all these other people in, then go, oh yeah, I can think of a solution for that. I can put that together. I can get another team together. And it's where, you know, I like the analogy using, like, literally just smashing groups of people together, and something's going to happen, a reaction is going to happen. And what comes out of that is so cool. And I think this whole community building, bringing people together, is really important. And what I've literally just launched this week alongside 3 medical students is this, we're calling it young health innovators kind of community. So, you know, under 25-year-olds, medical students basically, plus me, who are wanting to get into health innovation, or already in health innovation, and kind of building a community for younger people. How can people like yourself, who are very established, go to these events a lot, very experienced in this health tech world, empower newer, not necessarily young, but newer people and younger people to come into this space who don't really know? Like we've said, you know, it's very open. How do you get into health tech? There's not a set route. How can people like yourself help people like me get into this space?
Well, first of all, like I did, I guess, is reach out to you and give you the information. And I think it's then scaling that one-to-one thing of like, hey, you're someone that I think is talented. I think this is something that you'd be good at. I think this is something you'd find interesting. Hey, why don't you come to a couple of things and see how you feel about it? That's the sort of one-to-one model of me just having the phone call and saying that to you. The other one is, how do we do that en masse? And I think that's why creating content is important to us. It's why we do things like office hours for early stage companies, where we're giving free advice to earlier stage companies to get information to them. If you're talking about the layer like that you're in, that kind of earlier stage one, yeah, I mean, I'd probably say actually there's more we can do there, because it's actually, this is probably what I'm talking about. It's difficult for us to be all things to everybody. It's difficult for any company actually to be all things to everybody. And everything that we do has to be considered of like, in some way, shape or form, what's the payback, either through personal enjoyment and joy and satisfaction and stuff, or more frankly, in ROI and business terms, like, can this pay back in some way? So things like office hours for early stage companies make sense because it's both. It brings us joy. And if they were to go and raise money one day, or if they were I mean, we don't give the advice with this in mind in any sort of short time frame, but the point is, at one point, one of them might go and raise money and pay back, in 1 month, like all of the resources gone into it, which would be amazing. But it makes sense for us to do that and fits with our brand. It's interesting because the layer that you're talking about is it's difficult to actually think, because we've tried, by the way, of what do we do that adds value without being exploitative and without like all that sort of stuff. Where we land on it is that we create a lot of content and we open up our events to as many people as possible. I have the Health Tech podcast, which actually that group is a huge, huge listener group of my podcast, because it's very much kind of how to start a company and the journey of entrepreneurship and the early days of that individual and all that sort of stuff. We have Health Tech Pigeon as well, which is our free kind of newsletter. We have the Health Tech Pigeon podcast, which goes through the news. So we have a lot of content that's sort of available to people. But it's interesting. Everything that we thought of like, can we sell people a course that like allows them to skill up in health tech? And it's like, well, we could do that, but that's sort of like what Bite Labs do. And like, if we did it, we'd be monetizing them before they even get a job. And that doesn't feel very good to us, because like, there's nothing to say that just because we've sent you through a course, you're likely to get a job any quicker. Like, so actually, it's a tough problem to solve. And the answer is, I don't know. I'm very open to ideas on it. If you've got any, but maybe we can sponsor your community in some way, shape, or form, and do some stuff there. But yeah, I think it's definitely for you guys to figure that out for me. let me know what you need.
Well, I mean
Yeah.
that's great. That's great thing to bring up there. I think that is how it should be done. Instead of kind of top down, we kind of help each other. Us, with Esh Tatler, I'm sure you've met him or heard of him,
Of course.
and Sunny, and those of us who are kind of already in the space, helping people move in from a kind of route perspective rather than people coming in. And through that, you guys, I don't know, people like Hassan, people like Asmain Chowdhury, who have these opportunities, have these events, kind of empowering the empowerers. I don't know how to say this, but I think maybe that's the solution.
Well, it might be, yeah. And actually, one way to consider that, like, we're sort of starting a company on the fly here, but like one way to consider that is like the way when I was at your stage, what I had was time. And that was how I measured most of my resource, is that I just have time and energy to give. I can be up at 6, I can exercise, I can go to work. And then from 6 till midnight, I'm available. I got 6 hours every day that I can do stuff. I can go to events, I can set things up, I can try things that fail. I've got all this time, all this energy. Things shift as you get later in life, and family and just frankly tiredness, and I can't recover from my 6 a.m. workouts anymore by the end of the day. But the point is now that the resource that I have has shifted into like, I have a team of people, I have cash in the bank, I have resource in a different way. And I think it is up to, like we've just said, different organizations like yours and ours to then sit down and go, well, hey, how can we make something work with you guys have more time, you guys have more resource in those terms. We have resource in different terms. So how do those two things come together? And you can sort of see how that makes sense of like, that's a sponsorship model, isn't it? Of like, we're going to give value. The people doing the work are going to give value. We give value in cash. They give value in work. And hey, presto, you get to the end of it where everyone receives the value, right? So it's considering it in those terms, I guess, of how we'd get to that answer.
Yeah, and there's lots of things we could do. I think that's really, really great way of putting it. That you have different things to give and different things to get out of it, and that works quite nicely in that respect. And so to finish off, we've spoken a lot about yourself going from being a doctor into health tech, how medical students can go into health tech, how anyone can go into health tech. But from your perspective, what are your top 3 tips for doctors who are interested in getting into health tech? How can they do that? What is your advice to them?
So the first one is one thing that we talked about at length here, which is do your research and make sure it's right for you, become informed. And the way you can do that is by, similar to what I said before, like figure out a clinical area you like, figure out a technology that you like, and then just message people en masse. And you're not going to get everyone reply to you. And that's the first lesson in the real world, is that it's not a conveyor belt. It's not easy. It's not simple. It's not straightforward. People are just going to ignore you, but that's fine. But once you get an in, have a chat to someone, figure it out, ask good questions, ask questions you genuinely want to know the answers to, and go from there. Take another intro or a couple of leads and learn as much as you can about the space. The other tip is do the work. Now, I think I don't want to generalize too much here, but I have been in a lot of conversations, and I've done intros for people and stuff where like it is incumbent on the person that is receiving the introduction or the advice or whatever to then actually go away and do the thing. And I think we can expect a certain thing. Like it's very easy to think, oh, like XYZ should happen because I'm a good person and I work hard and like blah blah blah. That can be a framework that's, I guess, strengthened when you've got a national application system and everyone's ranked and everyone's scored and all that sort of stuff, and you can literally quantify how deserving you are of a job based on a score out of 100 or whatever. That isn't how the actual world works. And whatever advantages or disadvantages you think you have, they become irrelevant very quickly when you're just scrambling to prove your worth to someone for them to create a job for you in a startup or all that sort of thing. And so abandoning the idea that just because you're a medical student, just because you're a doctor, just because you're this, that, or the other, that you're deserving of anything in these wild westy worlds is very important. Like, just get that out your head. Like, it's not fair. It's not, you might not be deserving of what happens here, but like ultimately you have to just put the hours in and do the work. Now, I'm very acutely aware there's a survivor bias here of me saying that, because everyone in this space that's got to any level of success will always say it's a mixture of hard work and luck, and I'm no different. But a cricket analogy, if you bowl line and length for long enough, you'll get the wicket. And I think that's the thing. You got to turn up every day and do the reps, do the work, and put yourself in the right place. And there's that golfing quote, isn't there, of like, it's funny, the more I practice, the luckier I get. It is that. Put in the work, put in the reps. That'd be tip number 2. Tip number 3, it's ironic this to get into health tech, but tip number 3 would be acknowledge that your mind can change, and that is okay. Because you can learn something on this learning journey and realize, oh my God, this isn't actually for me in the extreme. Or you can realize, oh, this specific thing isn't for me, and just move on to the next thing. As medics, particularly, we attach a lot of identity to what we do, and who we are is very rooted in like what we do for a job. And attaching your identity to a certain part of health tech or anything like that, I mean, attaching your identity to any part of like what you do as a job can be dangerous for a variety of reasons. And I'm sure there's many a psychotherapist that can interrogate that more than I can. But yeah, acknowledge that you're a human, and you can change. You can change what you're interested in. You can change what you like doing. You can change all of these different things, and that's okay. That's completely normal. That's completely reasonable, and that's why in the world outside medicine, people have 3 or 4 entire careers in their life. And in order to sort of optimize for that, is keep your options open. So making decisions on your job and career for optionality is a useful framework. So the reason that I went to an accelerator rather than joining Babylon, by the way, which I had an offer for, not an offer for, but an interview for, and all the rest of it, I was interviewing a lot of different health tech companies at the time. But the reason I went to an accelerator was in part because of this specific work and various bits and bobs. But a big part of my framework in going there was, why help one startup when I can help 30? That gives me more options. That gives me more things to look at. It gives me different skills that are applicable to lots of companies rather than applicable to just one. And so I optimized for that kind of optionality. And that's part of my freedom framework, right? That I'm, again, pathologically optimizing for freedom in every sense. But yeah, I'd say that's my final tip is basically set it up so that you've got as many options as possible, and acknowledge that your mind can change. But if you've done the other 2, and you've done the work and you've done your research, and you're really maximizing every opportunity that you have, you'll definitely find a way eventually. And yeah, it's just it's not the easiest world to get into, but it's incredibly rewarding once you're in. And so don't expect to get any points on any applications for being part of it. It's not good for people that want that stuff, because the reward that you get from being in it is very sort of intrinsic to the space. You're rewarded from within it, rather than externally. So it's gotta be your bag to get involved.
Yeah, completely. I absolutely love those. I really resonate with that last one, and acknowledge that your mind's going to change. Applying to university, it's like, but what if in 2 years' time I don't want to do this anymore? Like, that's
Very
quite
good point.
scary. It's quite scary, to be honest. And that's, again, why medicine was an interesting one, because I'm like, do I want to apply to a career when in 5 years' time I might go, actually, no, I don't want to do this. And so, do those other two things, and that will help. If your mind does change, do the research, do the work. I absolutely love that. It's been so great to talk to you. Thank you for being on the podcast today. It's been great to have you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.